Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Influencer Insights, where I have Anne Schweitzer from Powell River, Sunshine on the Sunshine Coast in beautiful British Columbia, joining me tonight. She's a model that's just got started kind of recently, and she's also a registered nurse, and she's been dealing with a lot of the challenges going through the COVID years and working on the front line. So, welcome, Anne, to the podcast. So glad to have you joining us tonight.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Right on. It's so good to have you. Anne's a mom of 3 kids, so she's very busy, and we just appreciate that she's given her time tonight in sharing what she has to share to us on the podcast. So, Anne, starting modeling, do you want to give us a little background how you got into that? What kind of drew you into that concept and that idea there?
Yeah, so just to rewind a little bit, I have to thank you guys for having me because it's giving
Oh,
me a little respite from those
sure.
three just talked about. So this is wonderful. Um, so how I got into modeling, I believe it began during the pandemic and the work hours, working as a registered nurse, actually specifically working in long-term care. So my background as a nurse is quite strictly acute care. I was working in cardiac care. I was working in high acuity um, down in Vancouver. And then when I moved with my family to Powell River, we wanted to start a life that was a little bit quieter, a little
Yes.
bit slow paced. It was much more affordable to move up here. And then it gave me the option to stay at home a little longer with our kids. Um, and so, yeah, getting back to work after having kids, it was like jumping literally into a pandemic. And so the timing was, it was really good from like the health authorities perspective because they're like, yay, we have an extra nurse to help us as a frontliner. But from my perspective, it was really overwhelming getting into nursing at that time.
Mm.
And specifically in long term care, there was just so much fear around COVID because I was working with a very vulnerable group.
Yeah.
And so it really took a toll, not only on the mental health of myself, but on the mental health of my family. And so I just, like working with a fantastic collaborative team of healthcare professionals and just like having a fantastic network of friends
Yes.
to say like, okay, let's work on self-care for Anne because she is definitely forgotten that word, that term in her vocabulary as a mom and as a nurse. And so it was like almost forcing me to choose things that were going to be more self-care. So getting into modeling, it was not only a way to be creative and expressive, to find myself again
Mm.
through a pandemic, through having children, being a wife, all these different things.
Yes.
It also, I really wanted it to kind of show how beautiful like motherhood can be and how beautiful being a nurse can be. Is like sometimes we
Absolutely.
think nurses and we see them in their scrubs and their floppy hair and because we're exhausted and we're working these long shifts. But what is nice is bringing modeling as a nurse as well and kind of like molding that together is just showing that it is a high profession.
Yes.
Um, and the um, I feel like nurses need a lot of like we have a lot of credibility. We do best practice. Everything is evidence based, and so we need to be seen that way. And so bringing in a little bit of modeling into nursing and vice versa, a bit of nursing to myself through modeling
Yes.
was a really nice blend, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
thank you, and to all of the frontline workers. I think you guys all went above and beyond in a time that nobody really gave you an option, right? Just to dive in and deal with the crisis at the time. So
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also agree it's like a big puzzle where
yep.
everyone had their piece in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so as much as maybe we were like, the borders of the like as frontliners, we were the borders just to hold everything together. Everyone else was those little pieces that we needed. Staying home, wearing masks, washing your hands, doing what you could for the cause of just
Sure.
getting through this, right? And getting everyone healthy and back to their baseline. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, thank everyone for what they did.
Awesome. Tell us, just to get into the modeling a little bit, what was the
Mhm.
process that you went through? Did you put some test shoot? Did you go to a test shoot? Did you just start submitting to agencies? What kind of sparked that, and where did you where'd you get started?
So because I'm quite remote, like Powell River is very isolated. It doesn't
How
give me
isolated?
so it's 80, I think it's 83 or 85 kilometers north of Vancouver,
Okay.
but there is no direct highway here, so you have to take two ferries.
Oh my, that's
Yeah.
fun.
So one ferry is from Horseshoe Bay, which is like West Van, I believe, and
Okay.
it goes to Seashelt or Langdale, and then you drive an hour and a half to Earl's Cove, and then you take another hour ferry into Salisbury Bay, which is just kind of it's on Highway 101, and you drive another half an hour to Powell River. So, so many times I'll introduce myself and I'll say I'm from Powell River, and people will say, "Oh, how do you love the island?" And I can understand people's logic for that
Yeah.
because taking a ferry, you're likely going to an island, but Powell River is just isolated that way.
Right. So
So
how long does it take to get to Vancouver if you were going to go
it's,
back? 6 hours?
yeah, it's 6 hours. It's about
Oh
six
man.
hours. But if you're going in the summer and it's a really busy weekend, you could be traveling all
All
day.
day.
You're really at the mercy of the BC ferry system. But
Sure.
um, my kids, I won't say anything negative about it because I know there's a lot of
Yeah.
um, not challenges, but frustrations from people who live here with BC
Yes.
ferries. Sometimes we feel so isolated, but my kids absolutely adore the ferries and they love waiting for them and getting on them. But so just to answer your question, Numa, I was essentially just looking online and seeing um, the accessibility, the user friendliness of different agencies, and I kind of put myself out there to Numa, and it seems so easy. And honestly, for someone who is going through life with like working full time, way more than full time. I mean, during the pandemic, I can't even tell you how many hours I worked.
Oh, crazy.
3 kids, trying to be a wife, not always the best one at times. And I needed something that was just like, okay, this is how it works. It's really easy. You have an interview and we let you know if you are invited on our team. And what I loved about Numa in particular is that it seemed, and I wish I needed to look it up before I actually had this interview today,
Sure.
but it seemed to be very about diversity. And I just absolutely love that coming from a very religious background, very orthodox family.
Sure.
Um, that has evolved and it's been so beautiful. But my family is very, very colorful. We're very diverse.
Cool.
We probably have every color of the rainbow in our large family, and so just aligning with something that reflected diversity.
Mm.
I've been from a size 0 to a size 16. My weight fluctuates so much, but I feel beautiful at all levels of my weight.
Awesome.
And that's an internal thing.
Yep.
And I feel Yuma was able to emulate that. And that was really important to me. So yeah, the process was super easy. Where the conversation is going to go. It's so like, it's improv, right? And
Yes.
I love it. So I think it's great. So yeah, Numa's been a great kind of not a starter, but an introduction into the modeling industry.
Sure.
And I've done a couple. Honestly, it's about building up my profile right now. I haven't landed any gigs. I've done a couple little, like I'll put forward myself for a few little things, but I haven't heard back, which sounds really hilarious. But at this point, for me, it's building a profile, a portfolio,
Absolutely.
and working, meeting people. I think that to me is like the purpose of this is just to be outside of what the pandemic did is really isolated people. And I felt like it was like, no, you don't have control over me in that. And I
Yeah.
will do the things I can do to network with people in the way that I can.
Have you worked with a few different photographers already to this point, or have you kind of done locally, or been able to go to the big city and do some, or?
So yeah, mostly it's with her name's Anna Soriano, and I hope I pronounced that right. She's in White Rock.
Cool.
She's fantastic. She's just like a woman that cheers other women. She totally believes in the power of women. And so when I'm there, I feel super confident. And and she works with her daughter, actually. Her daughter's a makeup artist, and they kind of pair up and hair, makeup, and the whole
Nice.
thing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I feel like I can just like, oh, it's like a dance, right? Like you're there
Yes.
and you just like completely do whatever kind of comes out naturally. And
Just creating and
yeah, and then you look back and you're like, wow, look at that. And I think what happens too is like the world is so molded, and it really, like, from a child, there's just so much pressure to be a certain person. And like I feel like um creativity, and one way to do that is modeling, is just to kind of like sprout out from that mold.
sure.
And so yeah, she definitely creates a space where um yeah, you can do that and be yourself, which is cool.
Awesome. Have
Yeah.
you had the opportunity to shoot indoor, outdoor, studio, that sort of thing, or
So
what do you like
her
better?
studio, yeah, hers is a studio. And I mean, I think there's pros and cons to all different settings. I don't really, like narrow myself to anything. I just see things as, yeah, what good can I get from this in this situation or setting, and vice versa. And then like with my family, I've done so many shoots like with different photographers in Powell River, and most of them have been outside. And that's nice because I feel like families are super fluid,
Sure.
and they zoom and they're loud. And so mostly the photographers up here are like, hey, let's just take you down to the beach, or let's take you. And I actually use those, some of those shots as well. And I incorporate them in my portfolio, and they're beautiful. Honestly, I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's
Yeah.
amazing sometimes what you plan and you're kind of like, I don't know how this is going to go, and you just end up with something just incredible too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what have you got lined up for shoots coming forward? Do you have anything booked yet, or is it
I reached out to Anna again. She's kind of my go-to person.
nice?
She is like a Numa photographer, and
Yep.
I just, because I feel so comfortable with her, that's kind of my landing pad, I guess, when I come down to Vancouver, is with her. And then I have a girlfriend's 40th birthday, and we're all doing like,
Nice.
so like glitz and glam, and we're doing a glamorous photo shoot for that too. So really excited about that. Yeah.
So no, that's very cool. And you know, it's surprising over time how all of those things come together, and pretty soon you've got a really full portfolio as well, right? It doesn't, you can have fun along the way, and it doesn't need to be this big rush to try and build everything. It just comes together at some point too, right? So
Yeah, exactly. I was at a quilting, what was it called? Quilting, forget. But it's just like everyone had their quilts on display at the rec center, and it was a
cool.
guild. And just what you were saying, that analogy of just like, each little square, once they line up, they become a quilt at the end. So it's
Yeah,
it's similar in that it's that, putting things together, making a pattern out of, or collaging, whatever you kind of do within the last year of your life, 2 years. It depends on what you're going for. So I'm not, clearly, I am not invest all of my extracurricular time and career time to modeling.
sure.
So you're interviewing someone who, has a different focus, right?
It's cool.
But also, I really like the fact that, and I don't like saying it this way, but that I'm not just mom, and I'm not just a nurse.
Sure.
Um, have like multiple hats and all together. Because at the end of the day, I really want my kids to respect me.
Hmm.
Um, at the, that's like my goal, and I just want them to be like, "Hey, that's cool, mom. Like, I'm really glad you did that. I'm really glad you tried
Proud
that."
of you. Yep.
Well, and historically looking back, I mean, I work with patients, they're in their 80s and 90s, and they always say to me, time went so quickly,
Hmm.
can't believe, how fast it went. And if I could do it over again, I do, do so many different things. So I get the opportunity to listen to that advice and just like say, okay, yeah, I'm a mom. Yeah, I'm a nurse working through a pandemic. But yeah, I have the opportunity to do something that I've always wanted to do and get into modeling. So I've done that.
Awesome. Good for you. That's huge encouragement to anybody. And it doesn't matter where you start, right? But I am
Mhm.
a little curious now, like, did you ever want to do this as a little girl? Was this something you dreamed about, or when was the spark that first kind of
Uh,
initially lit to even thinking about this?
I always wanted to be an astronaut.
Cool.
Yeah, astronaut, but I'm afraid of flying. So there's that. Yeah.
Kind of write that
But
one up. Yeah.
well, my girlfriend, I went to elementary school with a girl who, and she was in a modeling agency when I knew her in kindergarten, grade 1, 2. And
Cool.
my mom and I would pick her up. And my mom, or I guess the agency had said to my mom, like, we'd like to see if Anne would try. And my mom was like again, very orthodox, very like
No.
religious. Absolutely no way.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm actually kind of happy about that because I feel like modeling is about timing. And I feel like
Ooh.
this is actually the best time for me because like I know who I am. I'm so
Yes.
confident in myself. I love myself. There is nothing that someone could say that I would be like, "Oh, really?" Like, I've gone through a lot and I as a mom, you get to really mold who you are. So,
Sure.
even like I'm 36, and I'm modeling for the first time actually a couple years ago. So I got into it about at 34, but there
Cool.
is no end to modeling at a certain time, right?
That's right.
There's a time for everything.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's really well said because sometimes people get thrust into things and a couple of years waiting wouldn't have been all bad either, right? And some people they're ready to right out the gate too to jump right in too. So
Oh,
that's
absolutely. And I totally think that every individual person has their own little timeline, right? So
totally,
I'm here to judge anyone on their choices that they made because it may have been an absolute wonderful thing for them.
yeah. And on your part, creating a beautiful family. I mean, what better gift can you give back to the world than doing that too? So you get to do all of that. That's pretty cool.
Well, don't thank me yet. They're little monsters.
That'll be
Maybe in
fine.
10 years. Actually, my 8-year-old and I went to Rona and we bought him his first drill.
Nice.
Um, we
Good
were
man.
working on building a fence together for our chicken coop. And so yeah, no, I'm at the stage now where it's like, hey, I like you. We could be friends, but
Right.
before it was, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is so yeah, I'm in a place right now.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, if you don't mind me asking a little bit about because you mentioned right off the start that you're a registered nurse and you've kind of been through the COVID thing and obviously that sparked the modeling interest and jumping back into that. What was it like in March 2020 when you started to realize that the world was going to change in a hurry? What was that like on the inside, I guess, being a nurse?
I think it was really hard to make it work for everybody. It was just really disturbing seeing how everyone had their different views and perspectives.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, we just couldn't come up with some type of solution. And I thought, like at 2022, or at the time it was 2020,
Yeah.
I just thought, like, haven't we learned enough? Like, haven't we figured out more? Um, hasn't history taught us about pandemics, 100 years ago and then another
Right.
100? So it was just like I felt really lost and I felt very like I need someone to really kind of lead us through this time and give us
Mm,
more information. I feel like there was a huge communication
right.
gap there.
Did you
Um,
felt a little bit in the dark
every
on things?
day changing.
Right.
Every day the policies were changing. But I will say, I mean, no one knows the future, right? We can
That's
only
right.
learn from the past. And
Yeah,
I know that the leaders did the best they could with what they knew.
I agree.
And also, like humanity, we hate change. So I get how hard
100%.
the concept of the pandemic was because it was all about change. It was all about learning new information and evolving. And it was like, and it was forcing you to, and nobody wanted to, right? It was like picking all the people that like were hiding in their houses for years and thought that they stay from social, the social culture. And it's like, no, you too, you need to wash your hands. And
Right.
you under the bed, you need to wash your hands. And nobody was hiding from the pandemic, right? It actually really affected my marriage.
Oh,
Huge. Oh, big time, big time. That's a long story, but
slight disagreement.
uh, my partner and I completely did not agree on the mandate on vaccinations.
Okay.
And so just I thought, it was just hard because, you're working with colleagues that you've worked with for years and you're friends with, but then you would have polarizing ideas. And then again, the policies were changing all the time. And there was just so much fear because of the unknown.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, if you can think back, like people were bringing in food, but they'd like wipe down everything from the grocery store.
Yeah.
And like now that it's like 2.5 years later,
People
three
don't even
years,
think about it.
we realize that is not necessary, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's like, I don't know. There was just, I feel really grateful that
Yep.
like we got through it. I feel like in hindsight, it would have been nice to know, like, listen, this is going to be a year of hell, but in a year, we're going to make it. Like it's almost like a labor and delivery when you're in
Yeah.
birth. It's like, okay, Anne, at the end of this, you are going to have this beautiful little newborn. You can do this.
Can't
But at
scratch
the
it.
pandemic, it was like during the pandemic, during all that fear and that laboring, there just seemed not to be an end. It just continued and continued.
So was there like, because I mean, initially they said, we're going to be a couple weeks, few weeks here to just to flatten the curve, popular term back then, right? Like when did you realize, like in, I guess the medical system, did you know right away that this is going to take a lot longer than 6 weeks, or did you kind of begin to see after the 3-4 month mark that this is going to go on a while, or?
No one had any clue. No one. And everyone had, like, from nursing staff to housekeeping, from care aides to internal medicine doctors, everyone had their perspectives on it. Everyone
Hmm.
was online looking at different, like, evidence-based practices. I was working as a casual RN at the vaccine clinic, and like every week the guidelines were changing. Like, okay, Moderna is best for patient. I can't remember exactly, so don't use this as a reference, but this is
Sure.
an example. Like Moderna is better as a second dose for patients over 75, and then like a month later, it's like actually we're seeing that Pfizer is the more appropriate one. So it was just like, I mean, it was kind of nice. Like, I mean, this is science, right? This is like science evolves and it changes with time. And so, but it was just like, everybody's watching us, everybody's waiting, everyone is like, oh, it was so sweet. There's some amazing things that came out of it, like the gratitude, right? But then there was also a lot of just like hostility and resentment, but based out of fear, and I
Yes.
don't judge people either too, because I think all of the emotions experienced during the pandemic, everyone should be allowed to have, you know?
That's well said. Yep.
Yeah.
It was a trying time, and people felt differently about things, right? So.
Hmm. And it would be interesting, some of the people, actually all of them, including myself, how do you feel now that the pandemic is in its final stages? Like, technically, we're not a pandemic anymore. It's moved on to,
Pandemic.
yes. So, with that knowledge, how do you feel now? Like, would you, knowing that it was, say, if they had said it's a year of hunkering down, would you have said, okay, I'll just do it for a year? Yes, I'll do it. Or yes, I'll get that vaccine. Or yes, I'll do this or whatever. Um, but I think because it was just such a long process that people, and there was so much unknown, that
Yeah.
it just made it really difficult for people to make informed decisions.
Yep. Agreed. That's well said. Good insight, and probably things to learn next time, right? God forbid we see them.
Yeah. Oh,
but somebody
Wash,
someday will. So
wash your hands.
wash.
Honestly, it's incredible, like
Yeah.
actually incredible. Actually, I had to do an interview for the University of Vancouver Island. They were seeing if they wanted to hire me as a healthcare instructor, and I had to do a presentation on hand hygiene. And I just said, like, fundamentally, it's incredible, like the effects of such a simple, basic human
Yeah.
skill.
Yeah.
Because nursing is primarily dominated of skills. It's a very skill-based profession.
Right.
And we always think like wash your hands, blah, 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 whatever. We'll start an IV, we'll do all these
Yeah.
incredible skills, save lives, wash your hands. But it's amazing what washing your hands will actually do.
Small thing, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully we've learned that in the world. So I was a proponent of washing hands before the pandemic started. So hopefully that message is kind of crossed over for people now. So
Yeah. Kind of nice when I go into Walmart with my kids. It's like now it's like a routine, right? I love it. I love the routine that we've built through the pandemic. And that's like, okay, as soon as we enter into this building, we wash our hands and we say hello to the greeters and then we continue. But we automatically wash our hands because it's such a simple thing. And what we're doing is we're protecting vulnerable humans, right? We're protecting people that can advocate for themselves as well, because like the elderly or, little children or pregnant women. I mean, there's a number of people
yes.
with mental. I mean, that's another conversation, right?
Yep. And good advice for anybody listening or pay attention. You're the professional. So that's awesome. Thank you. What, I guess, going through the challenges, because there was a lot of unknowns, a lot of fear and stuff like that, and you being on the inside would have had some insight that others didn't, and that sort of thing. But that probably wears again on the mental health thing. I think you kind of mentioned that a little bit when we got started. But how did you kind of combat some of the tough days and push through on the days that you needed to? Because I'm sure there's long hours and that sort of thing working. What were some tactics that you used to try to keep moving forward there?
So that's assuming that my mental health, the thing with mental health is that you have to have insight, right? So there is a level of mental health that you lose insight in. And so staying within the scope of having insight into your mental health is such an important thing. And so that is what, yeah.
Tell me before you jump on, what do you mean by insight?
So with different mental health disorders, actually with probably all of them, you're so involved in the mental illness that you do not have insight. You cannot see it. So for example, your anxiety may be 10 out of 10 or whatever the scale is if you did an anxiety scale, but you may not know that you actually suffer from anxiety. You don't know that. Right. So for some people, they're actually not even aware. Or for example, for someone who has, a manic break or a psychosis or anything like that, they might not actually know that they're involved in that state. And so I think because I was looking a little bit into, I was studying a little bit before this interview.
Sure.
But like, how do you protect your mental health, or is there a cure? How did you cure your mental health? Well, like as a nurse, I know there is not a cure yet. And I always say that.
Sure.
Today, there is not a cure. Today, there is respite from your mental illness. There is rehabilitation to your mental illness. There is insight into your mental illness. There is therapy and so many, and they're beautiful. And so those are all the things that I'm constantly doing every single day to make sure that I'm insightful, that I'm reflective, that I'm reality-based, that I'm, in a collaborative team of healthcare professionals, like having a counselor that I see regularly. I was actually doing cognitive behavioral therapy, and that once a week. Do you know about that?
I haven't done it myself, but I know the concept. So
yeah, so just getting back is that those are the things that I've done in order to get back my mental health. So, like you said, the pandemic, it's not just the pandemic, like family life in a nutshell, having three kids, trying to work full time, trying to be a good mom, sister, friend, all of those hats that I had to wear, I couldn't because I'm not whatever, those super Marvel people like my kids
Wonder
always.
Woman.
I'm not. I mean, I would like to say that I am, but or I aspire to be a hero. I aspire to be the
Absolutely.
hero, my own hero. I aspire to be the hero for my children, but I am human and I can only do so much. And so it's just like really having a really sound team of healthcare professionals in my court.
Mm,
Um, I run every day. I run probably 5 to 7 kilometers every day
good for you.
um, with girlfriends. Yeah, I've got running partners, lots of them. My friend Sheila, Christine, Jazz, we all run. I'm at Anytime Fitness every day.
Nice.
Um, and I take medication, which I see as a way to it promotes like respite from some of my mental health
Yeah.
negative side effects. It also causes me a bit of weight gain, and so that's I talk about weight a lot because that's one of the
Cool. Yep.
unfortunate effects of some of the psychiatric medications. But what's really, really cool is that my primary family doctor is incredible at listening to me and like my concerns. And so he has like done everything he can to about my weight with the medications. Because
Right on.
the thing is like I think a lot of fear is not having choices. And when you have a mental illness, you feel like, or you may, this is how I felt,
Sure.
is I have no choice. I
Right.
have no choice. And it's like, no, no, I have control and I have power over this, but I have to just be accountable and responsible for my mental illness.
Sure. When so you've done a lot of work yourself, and it's definitely your expertise in the healthcare field probably helps that out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to self-diagnose that you were kind of maybe going down some of that track before? Did somebody make some comments, or what kind of brought the awareness, the insight to you when you decided to get the help or do the things that you needed to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So after my third baby is actually when I first had a mental health diagnosis. Before
Okay.
that, I had psychiatric history. So it wasn't until I was 31 years old.
Mm,
It's interesting because mental health usually its presentation is like in the 30s. And
interesting.
yeah, it is. It's like and it usually happens with like a break, right? So
Right.
for pregnancy, hormones actually was my break. For some people, it's marijuana or whatever drug of choice. For some people, it's like incredible stress. Some
Right.
people, it just happens because it's a familial thing. But definitely not that I know of. There's no the one that I've been diagnosed with, no one has had it in the family, but I believe it had a lot to do with pregnancies.
Sure.
Um,
That's a big thing. So
yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of discussion now on postpartum depression, on postpartum um, blues, and it obviously evolves into more than that. But
right.
you know, yeah, it's a big conversation
Did
because
it
mental health. Yeah.
did it because you're mentioning that it happened after pregnancy, like was it because usually there's kind of a period where everybody kind of accepts that your body's going back to
Mhm.
normal. Like, was it a year or two after that you decided that, hey, I need to get some help, or did you go get help right away? Or
So it happened at around it was about 7, 8 months postpartum. And it was like a couple different things. There was some insight. I did tell my husband,
cool.
but there was also not some insight there.
Okay.
And then also a bit of a family intervention, which I didn't like, clearly. Um,
We all hate that. Yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, it's amazing. Like sometimes when you're forced to do something, you actually are grateful
Side.
at the Yeah. But during that time, I tell you, I was pretty distraught. Anyways, yeah, so I ended up in the hospital when my baby was 8 months old, and I was
Mm.
there for a month.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm. A month, yeah. And then, which was incredible because it's a small town, I was actually being nursed by my colleagues. And then,
Okay.
yeah, and then I actually had to return to work because
Right.
I just love my job and nothing's going to stop me.
Yeah.
Um, and with everyone knowing my mental health background and like my diagnosis and why I was in the hospital, and I have to say that pretty close to 100% of people were pretty good, pretty incredible about it.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
but it's still hard. The hardest person on me has always been myself,
Sure.
and I think um that was the diagnosis also was like the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because
Crushing.
you know as you know as a culture and like where we're at in 2023, you think that less words would define people, but more words seem to define people. And
Yep.
I hate that because like at the root of it, I'm just Anne, and I
Yeah.
don't want to be described as Anne the blah 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 blah, right?
100%.
And it's just like, get to know me first. If you like being around me, if I make you feel welcome, if you feel safe in my space, if you feel heard, respected, etc., let's be friends. But don't not be friends with me or get to know me based on your fear from all those words.
Right.
Words are supposed to be strung together to describe something, but I feel like sometimes they're really used against you.
It can be. Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
in
absolutely.
my experience, yeah. And then I feel like I'm always having to use words to just to like protect myself or defend myself. And but at the end of all, like just learning through this last year, because I've had a pretty tough year, it's just there you have a circle, you have a support network of people who know who you are, and that
Yes.
really helps.
Yep. No, I
Mhm.
agree. And sometimes, yeah, those words we speak, they get to be more judgmental than anything, right? And it's missing the person that is there, regardless of whatever you label it, right? So
Well, my goal, like in this conversation and most conversations I have with people, I'm a huge advocate of mental health. Like
yeah,
I I wrote, well, I love
cool,
to write, and I wrote this little book here,
awesome.
and it's about seeing the world differently. But anyways, in the hope of exposing mental illness and mental health conversations between colleagues, friends, parents to children.
Yeah,
Um, and essentially, yeah, I just want to show people that despite having a mental illness, you can still be incredibly high functioning. You can be like almost brilliantly high functioning in other areas, right?
yes,
Because
absolutely.
certain areas, you have these negative effects, but then you have the positive side of because I always forget, like, oh, and yes, there's so many negative effect, things to this, but there's also like really there are some good things too.
Yeah,
But also, to get my word out there is that, I'm a registered nurse working in high acuity. I've been working since 2010 as a registered nurse, and I've had just really good feedback from patients and families. And yesterday I was in Rona, like I told you, and I was getting a drill with my son. And
mm-hmm.
this up to me and she just said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Oh." And she's like, "You were the nurse for my husband."
Oh
And
wow,
unfortunately I couldn't, like, the Amagata was like, "Okay, you know that face, you know
yeah,
that, but you don't know the name. Like you're having a hard time."
I've been there.
And so I yeah, like I that's the point. The point is that you can be a really good nurse, you could be a really good mom, you could do all these things and still have a mental
Yeah,
illness. Yeah.
absolutely. What's a thought or something as you've authored a book now? I missed that earlier, so that's awesome.
Hmm.
What's something that you would encourage somebody that's kind of maybe they're at a place where they haven't quite accepted the insight or they're not they don't want to, commit to saying that I need some help. What would be some encouragement to somebody like that that's going through some struggling dealing with this, feeling alone?
Mm-hmm. That's a yeah. Well, um, it's a I think it that's a really hard one. There's just a huge responsibility for owning your mental health.
Mm,
Um, and I think at the core of it, and this is actually my mother-in-law and I don't always see eye to eye, but one of the things I remember her saying to me is that you're doing the responsible thing. And I thought to myself, well, then you do the responsible thing. Cause like we all need to be responsible and we
yes.
all need to own our mental health. And so I just really want people to walk away knowing that like it's not just you.
Yeah.
It's all I don't care like what level. It's a spectrum. You might be 100% on the spectrum and everyone can see it and it's diagnosable and there's a name for it. But you know what? There are 100% other people that are on the spectrum for something else, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, you are on the same playing field as everyone. Be kind to yourself, love yourself, get help. Don't tell everybody, like I've done, because not everybody, there's a lot of ignorance in education around mental health. There's a lot of stigma.
Sure.
And like, I feel like I've had to like be a voice and fight my way through it, but that's exhausting. And
Yes.
I really have that energy every day to do that for others. And sometimes I'm just fighting for myself that day. And so it's okay if you want to be private about your mental health until you're strong enough, you're competent enough in your diagnosis, all those things to speak about it, but just be gentle on yourself and know that it not only are you not alone, it's everybody, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's beautiful.
Mm.
How do people, like, you're on social media? How do people get a hold of you if they want to follow you along or support you in your modeling journey, or maybe if you talk about your book along the way or share where that's from? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm very disorganized and
Okay.
so I have Facebook and Instagram that I wish I could put more organization into. But if people want to add me on Facebook, it's probably the best
Okay.
way to get a hold of me and message me anytime, honestly. Um, yeah, one time I can't like I shared my story and this mom messaged me in my messenger and she really needed some like immediate assistance with her mental health. And I thought, you know what, as much as that like hurt vulnerability wise to like
Mm,
share where I'm at, like I potentially was one in a million to help this woman,
yeah.
get the help that she needed. And so,
Yeah.
what like pride is like supposed to be the biggest sin. Like there's some things in my head that are still very Catholic, very
Sure.
orthodox,
Yeah.
like, but pride really is. And so if I can like unveil myself and just say like, hey, I'm human too. Then if it helps other people, then what the heck, right?
Sure. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And
So my Facebook name is Anne Therese. So Anne is with an E. That's a really important one. And Therese is Therese.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll have a link to that as well so people can give Anne a follow. Your book, is it available to buy somewhere, or is it on Amazon, or is it
I,
anywhere else?
I'm going to soft launch it in a little bit. I'm
Very cool.
again, this last year has just been wild, wild ride. So once that is, it's on Amazon, but I still would like a little bit of a launching thing for it.
Cool.
And honestly, it's yeah, it's an example of how some people with mental illness see the world differently.
Yeah.
And it's actually about Powell River is this one. I have 3 different books that are on the way.
Cool.
So if anyone's up in Powell River, come on up and yeah, send me a message and I can get you a copy.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, and we just appreciate you jumping on and sharing all that and talking a little bit about the insides of being an RN in a crazy time and how that blooms into being a model and doing those kind of things as well. And I think that's a really awesome story to share to the world. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And just as a disclaimer, everything I've said is from my perspective.
Okay.
As an RN, I can't speak on behalf of any licensing board or anything like that. Those were my personal views
Sure.
and my personal insights and perspectives from working as an RN in BC during the pandemic. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for clarifying that and making sure that where everybody's on the same page. So it's been
Yeah.
a big help to everybody I know in the audience. So thank you for that.
Cool.
But other than that, I think we're gonna close it off here, and we look forward to hearing more about Anne and her book and watching her modeling career evolve as she navigates that through work and being a mom. And we're looking forward to hearing from you down the road again as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
All right. Take care for
Okay.
now.
Bye.